Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to see all of you over here. Today's discussion is going to be a panel discussion with the wonderful DevOps leaders that we have over here today. What we are going to do is that we have a few questions from the community itself that we had rolled out a form and they have submitted some questions that they want to get the takes from the DevOps leaders on them. And you'll get to hear their unscripted takes on all of those questions. We will be taking live questions from this audience today here as well. So while I'm doing the introductions and the panel is talking about themselves, feel free to start jogging your mind on what are some of the things that are top of your mind that you want to ask the panelists here today. So we'll be doing a mix between the community questions that have already been submitted, plus we'll be asking the live audience today their questions that they want to ask the panel here as well. So without any further ado, let me go ahead and introduce our wonderful panel. So starting on my left, we have Ryan Cox. Ryan is a technical architect at Salesforce. Ryan works with some of the largest high-tech organizations that are stretching the boundaries of what Salesforce was intended to do. Then we have Alexis over here. Alexis is a VP of Enterprise Applications and Business Technology at Guidewire, where she leads strategy to execution across all Guidewire's business systems like Salesforce, Workday, Oracle, BI, and data integration. Then we have Kevin Cheng over here from Accenture. Kevin is a senior manager of solution architecture. Kevin co-leads the Salesforce DevOps community at Accenture as well. Kevin has established and executed a Copado DevOps pipeline strategy for the COVID-19 vaccine management. So huge experience all across the board. And last but not the least, we have Sanjay Gidwani. Sanjay is our Chief Operating Officer here at Copado and was one of Copado's very first customers when he worked at Salesforce. So with that, while you guys are still thinking about a few questions that you want to ask the DevOps leaders, I have a question to the DevOps leaders. So while I'm asking that, again, make sure you guys are thinking what questions you want to ask as well. And with that, so I want to ask the DevOps leaders over here at the panel, what does DevOps mean for you? And what sort of experiences did you have going on throughout your career that led you to generate an interest in DevOps and become the DevOps leaders that you are here today? So starting with Ryan, do you want to talk about that?
Thanks. So I came to, I'm a technical architect, and I've been covering pre-sales technical architect, covering very large Salesforce customer accounts, Amazon, Google, Cisco, PayPal, things like that. My experience with Salesforce DevOps kind of began when I came to Salesforce about 6 years ago. I've worked at IBM for 20 years before as more of a software developer type person, and I was kind of shocked with the lack of DevOps built into the Salesforce platform. And I've for the last 5 years, I've been doing an implementation for a nonprofit in Denver called WeCycle. That's kind of my day-to-day DevOps experience, is kind of a side project doing this Salesforce implementation for them, and kind of managing that org for the last 5 or 6 years. So yeah, I've used a variety of tools across the DevOps kind of spectrum. I kind of use a lot of internal tools that we use that we've been built out from Salesforce, like Cumulus CI. Kind of across my customers, I've seen Copado deployments, GearSet, a variety of development DevOps tools that I've used, and seen how large customers use. Like Google uses Copado, for example, for deployments to like 50 different orgs, for example. So it's a big part of my day-to-day for my nonprofit, as well as kind of helping my customers understand, kind of just application development on the platform in general.
Love that.
Yeah.
All right, so as Abhishek mentioned, I run strategy to execution for all of our business systems at Guidewire. And the strategy stuff is great. but real value comes from getting things into production. And so the faster that we can do that, and with limited back and forth, the more value we can bring to our end customers faster. And that's just really important. So standardizing our processes, moving things through very fast is just really when you start to see all of the benefit of the hard work that the team has done.
And to talk a little bit about my journey and what DevOps means to me, whenever I was previous to being an evangelist for DevOps, I was working in solution architecture and delivery for Accenture. And I was a huge evangelist for Agile development, Agile methodology. And Agile is really about building the right thing. And then DevOps is about building the thing right. And so it was a natural fit in my evolution around my career journey. And my first experience with DevOps, and specifically with Capado, was during the COVID-19 pandemic, where we had an account in the public sector space where we had to go live with contact tracing in 14 days. And we were able to work with Capado to quickly stand up on day zero a pipeline, be able to commit and deploy code, and be able to deliver the solution within that 2-week period. And ever since then, I've been a huge proponent of Salesforce DevOps and tooling with Capado. And I want to advocate for other customers and clients around making sure that we have a solid DevOps pipeline to be able to deliver value efficiently.
So for me, DevOps has been a part of my entire career. When I first came out of school and working on projects at Accenture as a .NET developer, it wasn't DevOps at the time, but environment management, change management, those are things that I began my career with. Then I came to the Salesforce ecosystem, and you would think that, hey, you're going from this custom-built software to a platform such as Salesforce. They'd have a lot of these things built in. They didn't. So we'd be spending a lot of time with our customers, at high bill rates, delivering this solution, kind of like as Kevin said a second ago. And that I didn't think was, the right thing. We should be focusing our time with our customers in delivering the actual business value, not, spending money on Salesforce, which really led me to Capado back in 2013, where we just needed a solution and it just worked. And so from there we had continued to use it on our projects. And so then coming here to Capado in 2018 was, just that next step in my DevOps journey. But more recently, I've been thinking about DevOps and this question and where it might have been all technical to begin with, but really it can sum it up in two things. It's about ownership and teamwork. So what DevOps allows you to do, it allows people to have clear owners around who's doing what and who's delivering what, which really leads to teams working really well together in a very efficient and productive manner. So, as I've thought about my career and where DevOps has played a big role, really, yes, it's the technical components, but it really allows teams to work very highly effectively and helps deliver more value through ownership and teamwork.
Thank you so much, DevOps leaders. So now that you know a little bit about our panelists, a little bit about me as well. I'm a pre-sales. My name is Abhishek Saxena, and I'm a pre-sales technical architect here at Copado. And even before joining Copado, I have been working as a Salesforce DevOps architect for a global SI, and I have had the pleasure of implementing Salesforce DevOps for customers of different sizes, all the way, and t-shirt sizing the DevOps solutions for them. So and I echo with a lot of thoughts that our DevOps leaders have talked about here today as well. The way I started off my journey as well, I started off as a Salesforce DevOps, a Salesforce developer. And when I joined, I saw that no one was using DevOps, version control. This Salesforce is something which I started my career with. So immediately after college, when I became a Salesforce developer, I saw that no one was using version control. People were just going ahead and overwriting each other's changes like it was nothing. Whereas I was using version control even when I was in college creating my projects. So that struck me quite a bit. And that's how I just wanted to start using version control a little bit in the projects that I was working on. I did not really know much about what is DevOps or what is CI/CD, but over the years, as I started to include work on version control, then I got to know, okay, Salesforce has a few metadata related problems, the XML files, which are not easy to capture within version control. So those idiosyncrasies led me to be curious and keep on experimenting on improving the developer tooling, because I was facing those issues as a developer myself. So I echo with all of the DevOps leaders' thoughts over here as well, and that's been my journey as well. So now that we are done with the introductions, I'm going to start with a few questions that we got from the community. But again, after probably a couple of questions, I'm going to ask the live audience if you guys have any questions. So make sure you guys are thinking about them. So the first question, and I'm sure even if I do not ask this, someone's going to ask it from the live audience, is how does AI, remember I'm saying that buzzword, so how does AI help in the context of a DevOps process, and what does it mean for DevOps? And I would like to ask this to Sanjay, that what does he think about it?
Actually, thanks, Abhishek. It's funny. Alexis was on a call with us. What was it, like 6 weeks ago? And we were having a similar conversation. And something she said is what kind of changed my perspective on AI. And I've been using it since. I've been giving you credit. It's really about productivity, but allowing people to focus on the areas where you need human brains, right? And where can AI take care of the small things, the things that are easy to push through? It might be a picklist field or something like that, for example, being able to use generative AI for those things. But when we also think about it at Capado, we talk about unleashing human potential. So taking that concept and saying, hey, yeah, we can use AI to automate the mundane, but really having human beings focus on the big problems, the problems that only humans can solve. And I feel that DevOps is the right space for that. So thanks for enlightening me.
Thanks a lot for that, Sanjay. Any of the other panelists want to add in to have you guys given it a thought of where could AI be helpful based on what you have seen of AI until now?
I'll go. I've been trying to think through this too a little bit. I think that using Gen AI to help write user stories is a good place where you could use it. We have some things that are being announced today for Einstein for developers to, kind of help write code inside of Apex and generate flows and things like that. This is all part of the DevOps process, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what I personally think is, like, I would like to echo what Sanjay and Ryan have mentioned, that when you start using generative AI anywhere, you don't have that writer's block, that you have a blank screen in front of you and you have to start from scratch. So things like user stories, improving a user story, or just fixing some code that you have written, or just getting like a scratch code or at least a template on which you can build on. That's where generative AI can be really, really helpful and powerful within DevOps. And it could be things where I think people right now have to go to a specialist or an SME or search on like Salesforce Stack Exchange or things like that. You could get those responses from generative AI without having to create a bottleneck for your other teammates. Your teammates who don't have that much experience with DevOps can level up without even thinking a lot about it. So let's say you run into a deployment error, and right now, if an admin runs into a deployment error, or even a developer for that matter, if they have not seen that deployment error, they'll probably go to Google, search for it for 15 minutes, then go to different links to see what's the perfect answer, try to use that somewhere. But if you have generative AI capabilities built in when you're doing the deployments, maybe it can quickly give you suggestions that, hey, looks like you're missing a profile permission, looks like you forgot to add a custom field and you just committed the Apex class and things like that. So I think getting across that particular hunch or hump that people have and saving that initial time, that's where I think generative AI could be really, really helpful.
Yeah, I just would add to, every single IT organization right now is being asked to do more with the same or less. And that's a continuous problem that we always have. And I think generative AI can play a huge role there for us, right? And so, like Sanjay mentioned, when we talked about what Gen AI can do, one of the things that drives me crazy is my team spends time doing release notes after we deploy. Why? Right? Like, for what purpose? So that, obviously there's a purpose, but it takes a lot of time and it's not value add. But it has to get done. And so, gosh, I would love for there to be something where like we spend a lot of time in Jira. We spend a lot of time writing down what we're building. So take that, summarize the release notes. We know what we deployed. And let's move on to the next release, right? And so I think there's a ton of opportunity there just to take those manual processes that we're still doing out and automating them.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Alexis. So I'm going to ask another question right now to the panelists, but we have Courtney over here who can go across if anyone has any live questions. So while the panelists are answering the community question that I'm asking them right now, feel free to get the mic and be ready with your question. Okay, so the next question that I really want to get the DevOps leaders' take on is, what do you think are some of the skills that people should inculcate if they are thinking of starting to go into Salesforce DevOps or just learn Salesforce DevOps a little bit? Do you think this could be something that they could start their career within Salesforce on, or do you think they need some little bit of exposure within some different areas of Salesforce before coming into DevOps? Or simply, what could make a good Salesforce DevOps engineer or a Salesforce DevOps architect come into the position that you guys are in today and become a DevOps leader? So I want to really know Kevin's take on it, because I know he runs the Accenture's DevOps practice. I'm sure he has seen quite a lot of things.
Yeah, so it's an interesting mix, I will say. So when we are looking for talent to support implementations of DevOps, we actually have at Accenture two different delivery centers, one that supports DevOps and another that supports Salesforce. And so I oftentimes grapple with the same question when someone's trying to get into Salesforce DevOps, which capability do I tag? And so I think it's a little bit of both. Getting experience with Salesforce as an admin, understanding the standard basics of configuring objects, fields, and lightly migrating them from org to org with change sets is a good start on the Salesforce side. But then I would also say that an expert would need to understand source control and how to use Git and branching and commits. And so we've been able to, in our implementation projects, be able to pull talent from both sides of the organization. We find that to be really interesting. We've been able to develop specialists in Salesforce DevOps from both sides, and we've been able to cross-train effectively to be able to, grow someone in their career in this space. So I'd say I think it's definitely possible for someone to start their Salesforce career in the DevOps space. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Kevin. Ryan, do you want to add something based on your experience as well?
Yeah, I'd say that, coming to Salesforce 6 years ago, I had no experience with Salesforce. So the way I learned was by going through trying to first decide what I was going to do for an actual process for releasing code. And so I think the best way, for me anyway, is just to struggle through it and figure out what actually is the problem, right? It's tough, right? Understanding the metadata inside of Salesforce is one thing, but understanding how you're moving it from one environment to another If you do it by rote force at first, you start realizing, oh, there are all these tools that you can start taking advantage of. And there are tools out there that help you do like change monitoring, for example, right? To understand what people have changed inside of your org, capturing it inside of GitHub, things like this. So, I came from more of a development background first, and then it was introduced to Salesforce rather than starting my career at Salesforce. So I think that kind of lens on it helped me kind of make sure I set up a process for myself, right? So
Awesome. Thanks for that, Ryan. So the way I saw it was when I was working at an SI as well, and I was getting onboarded onto different projects. I think you get that empathy with the developers and the release managers when you have been in their shoes. If at least that's what my experience, in my experience, I saw that if we had someone who started their career with Salesforce release management or Salesforce DevOps, yeah, sure, we can train them on that. Okay, if you get a deployment error, this is how you resolve it. But they won't be able to empathize with the developers because they haven't lived through the pain of chain sets, or profile deployments are a scam, or it's so difficult to get pick list and record types deployed from one environment to the other environment. So if you have had that sort of experience where you have seen those horrors that Salesforce deployments have historically brought on, then I think you are able to empathize a little bit more with the process and make sure that you are able to help the dev team, the delivery team, in the right manner. So that's sort of what I think about it. So let's take a pause from the community questions and see if there are any questions that we have from the live audience. Perfect.
Hey,
Can we have the mic passed over here? Okay. Yes. So we have a question. We have a couple of questions. So
hey, myself Nikhil from Splunk. So you mentioned about AI, and thanks for calling the developers a scare and throughout the journey and all. Like it, we had so many scares, nobody understand, and Copado came, so it helped. The question I have is like AI and Copado, right? AI is a buzzword. In my opinion, no AI is better than bad AI. So what changes or what we should prepare ourselves? Let's say we are already customer for Copado. If AI comes, what should we need to do? One thing is data, but in terms of configurations or the fields, what should we need to do before we step into AI with Copado?
what I think about that is, just like anything else within Salesforce, you do that within your dev sandbox, right? You do not do it directly in production. And you do it in dev sandbox, you move it to test, and so on and so forth. So I think that's the same sort of case with AI as well. That if you ask AI a question, don't take it on its face value that okay, it's going to be 100% correct, because yeah, we all know that sometimes it makes up things that do not exist at all. So just like you're going through and searching for, let's say, a deployment error on Google or Stack Exchange, and just trying to see if that works or not, I think that's the way to go about it. In most cases, it's gonna be much better and save you a lot of time than if you had to do it without AI. So I think that's the way to start to think about it. And as it matures and grows within the Salesforce ecosystem and from Copado as well, I think it's gonna get better and better to be more precise and accurate on the responses that it gives out.
Hi, Nikhil. Great to see you. Two things. Data has always been at the crux of everything. Bad data in, bad out, right? And it's still going to be the case here for Gen AI. So I would say everybody focus on your data, make sure what you have is right, spend some time on the cleanliness. And then I would also say, like, the human brain is amazing, right? And Gen AI isn't going to replace it. And so there is going to have to be reviews. So I would say, like, plan for that, right? It's not going to automagically work and everything's going to be roses. you do still have to get in there and do a validation. But I think start with the data would be my suggestion.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think starting with the human in the loop processes, right? Starting there, because that will build upon what Alexis was saying, the validation. We'll get to the autonomous things in the not too far in the future, but it starts having the proper foundation. So if you're looking at AI, what are the key human in the loop business processes that you can start to leverage to get your teams to be more productive? At Capato, one of the things that we've done is we've taken our Capato AI companion and we've trained it as a virtual BA. So we spent some time thinking through what the right prompts were. How do you make sure that the questions that you're generating back to the user or the person who's using the AI are relevant? So through that, we've been able to generate user stories, but those user stories still have to be validated. So what that's been able to do is increase our BA capacity. But the next level of the bottleneck is going to be, just distribution of those user stories per sprint. But it's a start, right? So we now understand better how to ask questions through AI Companion and leveraging that as a virtual BA, and then that will help us get cleaner, retrain the AI with cleaner and more accurate data over time.
Yeah, so I'll echo that data is the most important thing for sure, but as a representative of Salesforce here, for things that are coming around our Einstein, generative AI inside of Salesforce, privacy is also very important, right? So, and where that comes into play especially with metadata inside of Salesforce, increasingly will be making sure that you have compliance categorization set at the field level inside of your org. These are the types of things that will eventually be fed into the masking that's happening from when call-outs are being made to LLM models to generate things like emails inside of Salesforce, right? These are the things that we're going to key off of inside of Salesforce to mask that data going in and out of LLM models to make your data safe and protect PII data, right?
Awesome. Thanks for that. So I hope that helped answer your question. We have another question. Please go for it.
Good morning. Hello. Hi, Jeff Blanchard from Salesforce. Can I ask a non-AI question? Is that allowed?
Please.
Let me check the
So
rules.
my question is, for a company that has Salesforce, at what point in their journey should they start thinking about switching from kind of an ad hoc manual kind of process that they are going through now to push all their changes into production to more of a formalized, robust, mature DevOps process?
So I'm a huge proponent of thinking about DevOps from the start of your delivery journey. Oftentimes, it's the initial minimally viable product that has probably the most components that you're going to be delivering to your production org. So it's really important to think about how you're going to build and deliver that solution in a timely manner, and thinking about DevOps as part of that initial journey with Salesforce. It's a lot better than maintaining component lists and using change sets to move and migrate those changes, or have kind of an ad hoc, version control management system to then trying to manage the deployment of that package from org to org.
Just adding on to that, I think Salesforce has now become mission critical for a lot of customers. Salesforce is no longer just reports and dashboards, obviously, right? So with Salesforce, you have MuleSoft going on, we have Commerce Cloud, CPQ, so many different systems that are going on. So just like at the start of the project, like Kevin mentioned, you're thinking about what's going to be our MuleSoft architecture strategy, or what's going to be our CPQ architecture strategy. The same way, we need to think about the release strategy as well at the start of the project, because I personally have been onboarded to so many projects at the last moment that, hey, we have the production deployment in the next few days, just help us with everything. We don't know what our manual steps are, we don't know how to create a package XML, we don't know all the components. It works in the QA environment, it doesn't work in the UAT. and we want to push everything to production. How to cherry pick what needs to be done, and at that moment it is very late. So that's when I've seen most people realize it, and obviously that's not the place you want to think about it. You need to start having those conversations about what your environment strategy needs to be, what your release strategy needs to be from the beginning of the project, just like you think about any of the other architecture decisions. Irrespective of how small or big that customer is, you need to have a release strategy. It could be anything, it doesn't have to be overly complex. Obviously, it needs to be t-shirt sized depending upon the particular project or the customer that you're working on, but you need to have it from the start of the project. Does that help, Jeff? Perfect. Awesome. Any other questions from the live audience right now? Awesome. Can we please have the mic passed over here?
Hello, kind of behind this column here. I want to kind of build on what we were just talking about. I've been a Salesforce admin since 2012. I've been in IT since 2000, and DevOps is new to me, if you can believe that. And I'm wondering why that is. Like we were just saying, this needs to be discussed right up front. And what can be done to make DevOps more present in all the discussions that I've been involved in over the last 20 years in IT?
I think we at Copado are doing a lot of work in this area. We have certifications, we have our community, which has over 80,000 members. We have Copado champions that are continuously talking about it. We have Salesforce DevOps specific conferences going on. So I think it has now moved to a place in the present day where at least everyone knows about that. Okay, there is something called as DevOps within Salesforce. So at least it has moved to that point. To answer your question, why it has not been there forever, because I think so. Salesforce obviously started off as a config-based platform with a no software logo, right? That you can do everything within Salesforce itself. But then as Salesforce grew, then we started to have like customization built on top of it. Apex was introduced, Visualforce pages, and like Ryan has the experience now, he's working with some of the biggest Salesforce accounts who are exceeding the boundary of what is possible with Salesforce. So they have done so much customization on top of it that it's not possible to work with just chain sets for those sort of things.
Alexis, you were telling us a story before in our prep about how, before from 6 weeks to 3 days. I think that's a good metric. But how did you make it at Guidewire a thing?
Yeah, so I started at Guidewire about 3.5 years ago, and we were doing everything manual. And so I think this goes back to the other question too, is like, when is the right time to bring this in? When is it going to make a difference? And so when we started looking at our processes, we took a step back and we're like, how many hours are we spending doing this? And how could automation help us? And Copado was one of the first things we brought in to really help us automate our processes. And I think people are really focused on the top of the funnel. Ideas, user stories, right? Having engineers work on them. But then we forget about like actually getting into production can be somewhat challenging. And how do we move that through the funnel faster, right? And so one of the stories like Sanjay was mentioning, our environment refresh used to take us like 4 to 6 weeks. And so we would wait till the end of our fiscal year and we'd be like, okay, everybody stop. Nobody touch anything. Here's your checklist. Every developer would take the checklist and they would go through the environments and we'd be like, okay, everybody finish the checklist. Now we're going to push it to UAT. Okay, everybody go through your checklist. Okay, pause. We're going to push it. And so we just did back and napkin math and it was like 40 hours at least per person, 10 engineers for 4 weeks, right? Plus we're not delivering anything during that time either. And we just did it in 3 days. So, I mean, and it took a couple of hours from our ops team. So, when you look at that, like total cost of ownership and ROI, and you can say, we can save, 40 hours times 10 people, it's a big deal.
does that conversation happen?
Luckily enough, I used my own budget to do it, but I did have a conversation with our CIO, right? So when I came in, and we talk a little bit about center of excellence too, right? And so when you look at a center of excellence, you look at like all of your processes that encompass that center of excellence, right? So how do you get from strategy to execution faster, deliver more value? But I like to just look at TCO. So what is our total cost of ownership right now? And do some time-based studies to say, hey, it takes us this long to do this process. How could we automate that? And what is the savings we're going to see? And so just keep it light, like 3 things. Pick the 3 things, 3 to 5. As you start to go into those like minute details of like, oh, I can save 2 hours here, your CFO is not going to care about that, right? Like find those big chunks. And then kind of do a swag in terms of a range. And then that's how I sold it, which is like, hey, we're going to pay this much. This is how much time it's taking of people. Based on their rate, we can save this much money.
Perfect. So enforcing that you have actual ROI metrics that you can share with the business leadership and prove to them that, hey, this is something that's going to be valuable. Because DevOps is something that's invisible, right? Because if you are a developer, you know that, okay, I worked on a feature story, I created custom fields or whatever, and then that has an output. But DevOps has an invisible output. So it's helping you reduce all those time sinks that you have in the process. But it isn't really visible to someone who has not been in those shoes, right? So that's why I think the technical team working with the leadership to show them that, hey, if we start using a DevOps tool or implement a DevOps strategy, if it's gonna take us 6 weeks, we can cut it down to 4 days or things like that. So I think that's a really important conversation that people need to start having with their business leaders. Another thing I wanted to touch upon that Alexis also just brought in was a center of excellence. So having a center of excellence, Alexis, you talked about it a little bit. Feel free to expand on it a little bit more. But what do you guys think about creating this center of excellence? It sounds like a buzzword, but how has your experience been creating a center of excellence, and what is a DevOps center of excellence, and according to you? So Kevin, you want to start with that?
Yeah. So from my viewpoint, as we work with large organizations, it's really important to establish, the release strategy, environment strategies, best practices for code quality and improvement within your pipeline. Whenever we think about center of excellences at Accenture, it's really about not impeding the process, more so fostering it. And we don't want to introduce bottlenecks through what we're establishing, but we want to enable teams to be able to deliver their solutions at the level of quality that we set forth. And so part of that is about leaning into automation wherever you can. Don't introduce manual approval steps. And so whenever we work with our organizations, it's really about helping to evangelize that and making sure that we're not enforcing these blocks whenever someone wants to get something to production very quickly.
Just to add on that, tell a story about a customer of ours, really large Salesforce deployment. They have literally 40 different systems integrators in there making changes. And even with Capato, it was challenging. I think Rohit, where's Rohit? I saw him a second ago. Rohit Bhagarapu, who's here, was a part of that project. And there he is. Yeah, Rohit, everyone say hi to Rohit. One of the things that Rohit and his team did with this customer was really focus on the ways of working, standardizing the ways of working, the way that this specific customer needed to dictate to the SIs. This is the way that it's done here. So I talked about ownership and I talked about teamwork. You can't establish that unless you have a solid playbook of how you work in a certain environment. When I was at Salesforce, one of the things when we were in customer success, we'd always say is the customer has to own their own success. And so those customers who own the environment need to be able to have a way of working can outsource success. And that, I think, is one thing that's really important in establishing a center of excellence.
So I work with a lot of customers that have a lot of different Salesforce orgs and a lot of different business units. And it's been increasingly more important to build out a center of excellence concept anyway, at least have some sort of guiding team that helps new business units on board onto Salesforce. Like, you know, a lot of the discussion here is like, where do you get started with DevOps? And, you know, having some guidance from some other team that's done something before is always good from the beginning, right? Have a DevOps process in place, have a backup and restore process in place before you even get started on an org, for example, is the kind of the best thing to do. I'll give a plug here is that I work with Amazon closely. They have like over 200 orgs, and they've only now, after being a Salesforce customer for, 15 years, have formed a COE. And one of the leaders is giving a kind of a panel session on it tomorrow at Dreamforce as well. So that would be a good one to go to.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much for that, leaders. Let's have a few live questions. Okay, perfect. Please go for it.
Hi, so I'm Lene with Huntington. We also are working on a COE, and we've been working on governance and a lot of things. We actually just recently purchased Capado, and so we're getting that implemented and very excited about that process. Right now, Capado is very strong in the Salesforce space, working with Salesforce specifically. I was curious about your roadmap long-term as far as expanding it out to, if we wanted to, because we've got MuleSoft and a few other things. We'd love to be able to use that and be able to do it across the platform. So talking about the COE and the governance across the whole thing, we've got lots of things that we support. What do you guys have? Do you have a roadmap for looking at more? I'd love to see growth in that area so we can expand.
I can take that. So 2 seats behind you is Esco, who runs our product team. You know, in terms of the product roadmap, we do have support for MuleSoft. We continue to want to double down in the Salesforce ecosystem, right? So being able to support not just MuleSoft, but Commerce Cloud and all of those clouds to be the core solution. Because when we look at it from a vision standpoint, what we want to be able to do is take the business process end to end, right? And then there are other experiments, I'll use that word, that we're working on in other areas. In other platforms outside of the Salesforce ecosystem, which will be coming in subsequent years. But right now, we're just really focused on Salesforce. The second piece to that is Capado is a platform, and our platform can support custom, right? So if you've got a system or something that's quote unquote not support our product, our platform is there to be there to help support there. So there's a lot you can do. We should probably sit down with the team to kind of work with you to chart your kind of journey and roadmap so that we can make sure that you're in the down the right path.
And with Capado's second generation framework, I can speak about developing custom. So Capado has a new framework and architecture that's recently been released. And for one of our clients, we were actually able to develop a customized DevOps solution to deliver, a managed package configuration using Capado and deploying assets as like a static resource in the Salesforce org. So we were able to work with the client to be able to use Capado end-to-end for all delivery of Salesforce, leveraging the same type of model for moving code and components by user story. And so that was a big win for that particular customer.
Just summarizing on this, so think about it just like Salesforce, right? So Salesforce is a platform where you have a lot of pre-built capabilities that are out of the box. Similarly, with Capado, you get those pre-built capabilities out of the box for Salesforce. But just like Salesforce, you can customize and build things that are not present out of the box on platform. Similarly, on Capado's DevOps platform, you can go ahead and extend it to do the things that it cannot do out of the box. We have our own marketplace called as Capado's DevOps Exchange, where a lot of our partners, customers, people from community have built on our Copado's platform and built these plugins, extensions for things that were not that our product team hadn't thought about for these specific scenarios. So if you build something like that, feel free to publish it on our DevOps exchange so other people can go ahead, and if they have the same problem, they can just install from our DevOps exchange. Hope that answers your question. Any other live questions that we have from the audience? Okay, while we're waiting for someone to ask their question, I want to shift the conversation a little bit. Is test automation worth the squeeze for the smaller teams? Is the juice worth the squeeze for the smaller teams?
Yes, it is. So, one of the things that I see when things go wrong for us is because there was no test case written and it wasn't tested. And so I think, we talked about baseline and we talked about foundational items, and getting that automated is epically important. And I think it just takes a lot of stress off of the team. And so just making sure you have that foundation set, I think is
Yeah, totally agree. It's also being able to build regression, right, in the code that you're developing. So no matter how large of a project, you're always going to be iterating upon the code that you build. And so with Salesforce DevOps, oftentimes you're deploying delta changes from org to org. And so it's really hard to detect if the small changes that you're making are actually going to break other capabilities that you've already built within the platform. And so by having a regression suite and automated test scripts from day one being built and run constantly within these orgs, you're able to identify potential issues ahead of the curve rather than trying to find them and debug them in production.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just echo everything that was Jess said. I think test automation is foundational. It's something that, is, I'll be frank here, foreign to the Salesforce ecosystem. There's 3.2 million people that identify themselves as Salesforce developers in LinkedIn. Only 2,500 of those have testing in their title or somewhere in their LinkedIn profile. So what that tells me is that testing is absent in the Salesforce ecosystem, and it's ultimately vital to the success of any Salesforce deployment or anyone using Salesforce as a part of their mission critical systems.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. What I would just like to add on top of it is that people are just like people were scared about release management and DevOps a few years back, that hey, how do we do it? We need a specialized person to do it. I think test automation is at that place within the Salesforce ecosystem right now where people want to do it. They have seen it work for other technologies, but they're a little bit scared. How to do that for Salesforce? Because just like DevOps or the CI/CD part of it, it's a little bit different for Salesforce. Salesforce has this shadow DOM that keeps on changing every 3 months with a new release. And if you have a Selenium script, it just breaks because Salesforce changes their underlying code base that's working on it. So it doesn't have to be that difficult now. We have our own product called as Copado Robotic Testing, which is very, very, very low code. And you can write on the robotic framework using natural language. So even your admins, business analysts can go ahead and record tests, and it's gonna spit out a test case that is human readable by anyone. And then you can attach it anywhere within your DevOps process. You can attach it as a exit criteria for different environments, and then you can combine those on, let's say, on the UAT environment, that all these user stories that I'm deploying, all of their test cases should be run automatically and things like that. It also serves as a change management tool. So let's say if you're onboarding your customers or your users who are going to use that Salesforce system, they can just go through that recording of how it is supposed to work and how it is not supposed to work as well, to be trained as well. So I think the advantages far outweigh the cons that people have thought about it. So absolutely everyone should be thinking about test automation. Okay, perfect. So I another question for our DevOps leaders. So, Kevin, I know you have worked with implemented Copado for a lot of customers. So, I want to ask you, Lenny from Huntington Bank asks you that what is the most important thing I should know when implementing Copado for the first time?
So I'm not going to say one thing, but four. Whenever you're going about implementing Capado for the first time, it's important to note that setting up the tool is not the challenge, right? That's pretty much ready for setup from day zero. It's really understanding that strategy. So thinking, number one, from your release strategy perspective, how are your teams delivering Salesforce solutions today to production? Are they all kind of going in a tandem effort where everybody's following the same release schedule, or does each team have free reign and what they're releasing on which day to production? Second is going to be looking at your environment strategy. So once you understand how people are releasing, how do you develop a strategy for your environments and your sandboxes to be able to support the movement of code through those environments? Number three is going to be about code quality gates, and automation. So what steps do you want to take within your DevOps process to validate that code is meeting quality standards, that you're running test automation, you're looking at pull requests and peer reviews of that sort, and how are you actually syncing your environments and keeping code in sync with your development environments? Lastly, number four, which is often overlooked, it's thinking about change management. How are you going about training your end users to use the Capado product based off the processes that you've put forth? How are you also executing a cutover strategy, especially for orgs that are mature in their development journey, where you need to move code that's maybe partially in UAT, not fully in prod, and how do you get them to use Capado in order to migrate those changes from dev all the way through to production? So I'd say those are kind of the four key important things to know when going about implementing Capado, separate from setting up the tool. These are the people and process activities you need to be thinking about.
Can I just add to what you said, Kevin? I think that fourth one is really important. Our customers who engage with the Capado community, that go in and get certified, take the training, take it seriously, those customers have an increased success rate by 100-fold. Customers that think that, again, goes back to taking ownership, right? That think the tool is just going to solve it. Those are the ones where we have to come in and help them work with Salesforce to make there. But taking ownership and doing the training, those are the two things that are going to increase your success by 100-fold.
Awesome, thanks for that. So I think we just have time for one more question. Anyone wants to ask a live question to our DevOps leaders?
Oh, hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Me? Okay, sorry. I guess my question is, because I know there's a mix of software backgrounds on the panel, how much is Salesforce DevOps its own discipline, and how much is it taking its own form or borrowing from just general software DevOps?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the industry has put forward a lot of broader industry, even broader than Salesforce, has put out a lot of thought in what DevOps is supposed to be and how to do like best practices. I think it's been around for more than a decade. So I think we absolutely need to inculcate some of the things from the broader DevOps community. But like we all know, Salesforce is a different beast, right? We cannot treat it like Java or Android where we get like an executable file and it just works. So we do need to take the best practices, but they need to be a little bit customized specifically for Salesforce. So at least that's the way I think about it. Anyone else want to add?
Yeah, I say that the skill sets for Salesforce DevOps and migration are so broad, specifically from an admin, to a coder skill set. How do you develop and everyone follow the same process in order to migrate their changes? And so it's trying to find that equal balance where you can make DevOps declarative for those admins, but also make DevOps as customizable for the development team so that they can get used to and comfortable using the tools that they know and love.
Yeah, I think the core metrics remain the same, that you want to improve the lead time, you want to decrease the change failure rate, you want to improve on the mean time to recovery. And so I think those DORA metrics or those concepts still apply. Just how we apply them differs a little bit. Do we need to think about packaging, scratch orgs? Do we need to think about individual developer sandboxes, long living feature branches, short living environments, all of those sort of things? Because these sort of problems do not occur in the broader ecosystem, which has a lot of its problems of its own about infrastructure, right? That Salesforce doesn't have. So I think the end goal is the same, where we want to improve on these DevOps metrics. Just how we get to them is a little bit different. Perfect. Last minute, anyone else wants to add on that?
I would just say, you know, across my application portfolio, our Salesforce practice is probably the most mature. And so, you know, we do try to standardize on processes. So every single team across applications has somewhat of the same process. Now, based on the technology, obviously it shifts a little bit. And maybe we've put more focus on Salesforce because we run a lot of our business on Salesforce, but it's definitely more mature with Capado, I would say, versus, I'll leave the application out of it. You and I can talk later, but it's definitely more mature on the Salesforce side.
Awesome. Okay, so thank you everyone for your time today. I really want to thank you for spending your Dreamforce first session over here with Coparo, and I want to thank our DevOps leaders for answering the questions. So let's have a huge round of applause for yourselves and the DevOps leaders.